There is black smoke coming from both of the towers. It's a horrific scene here. There's debris.
It was raining bodies. Those were the words of a firefighter who was at the World Trade Center on September 11th, 2001.
Make no mistake, on September 11th, it was an act of war. You want to hear that there were people that were so frightened that they jumped out of buildings and they exploded on impact? You want to hear that there were dismembered bodies? There's things that we haven't spoken about.
The men who flew the planes into the Twin Towers on that terrible day had dedicated their lives to Islam. They had studied the Quran and Muhammad's teaching. They were devout and determined to die as martyrs. According to their religion, their mass murder on September 11th was the holiest of acts, as Islam declared war on the West at the dawn of the 21st century.
We're getting there. Doesn't feel like it, man. I got young kids. I understand that, sir. We're on the way.
Continuing the long, bloody struggle over a millennium of jihad wars, land appropriations, cultural annihilation, gender apartheid, and enslavement.
Hello? We're looking at the financial center. Three of us, two broken windows. Oh, God!
Jihad had come to America.
They had announced it in the New York Times in the first week of December 2009. And the American people were painfully unaware of it. Nobody was talking about it.
There was a raucous hearing that took place last night. It gave both sides the chance to voice their opinions. It was pretty raw and emotional.
Community Board 1 considered whether or not to support a mosque near the former World Trade Center. Speaker after speaker railed against the Islamic Center.
This is an insult. This is demeaning. This is humiliating that you would build a shrine to the very ideology that inspired the attacks of 9/11. I encourage all infidels, Kafirs, and non-Muslims to join me, and Muslims with a conscience, decent Americans, on June the 6th at Ground Zero to protest the mega mosque going up on Sacred.
The June rally came about when we saw that they were not listening to the increased outcry by not only the 9/11 family members, but the American people. And so we thought that perhaps a rally would call attention to the opposition.
We wanted to give a voice to them and to express the frustration and the anger that the American people have in the face of the mainstream media's indifference and complicity, really, with this effort. And so we first came together on June 6th, and we had several thousand people there, upwards of 10,000, and then on September 11th with an even larger crowd, both times featuring speakers who were expressing the public opinion, the opposition to this mosque, pointing out what the sinister agenda of the mosque organizers really is, and how this mosque will be understood in the Islamic world.
An Islamic mosque at this site is wildly inappropriate.
Welcome America!
And they're coming to build a Mecca mosque. It is a slap in the face.
No mosque here.
Planes rammed into these buildings on 9/11, but what's happening here with this mosque is a continuation of the attack on all of us.
And the world is going to hear us.
To fully grasp this story, you must know 3 basic facts. First, after United Flight 175 struck the South Tower, its landing gear shot northward and crashed through the roof of the Burlington Coat Factory at 45 Park Place.
This is part of the plane. This is part of the plane that went into the trade centers that's in the Burlington Coat Factory.
The second fact is found in Islamic history. The Ground Zero Mosque is a triumphal mosque. The third fact is that many political and media figures have aligned themselves with the mosque promoters.
The rally, the June 6th rally on D-Day, it put the Ground Zero Mosque story on the map, and it became a national news story and an international news story.
She was interviewed for the Telegraph and the Daily Mail, I believe it was, in England. It was German and Japanese and Italian and French media. This became a huge story, and it became a huge story in part, I think, once it became impossible for reporters to ignore the fact that the huge mass of the American people were against it. And this was something, of course, that they saw as a challenge, as something they had to correct, as something where they had to teach the American people that they really ought to be just fine with this mosque.
The fires stoked by Geller were igniting mainstream media. On May 13th, New York Post columnist Andrea Pizer picked up on Geller's outrage and wrote a column she titled Mosque Madness at Ground Zero. She described it as a, quote, swift kick in the teeth. Salon.com says this is the first time a newspaper labeled the project as wrong and suspect.
Would you agree that no one has given them a chance? And there is all of this outcry about Cordoba House, when just 2 blocks away from Cordoba House exists a mosque that has not only been there since before 9/11, but predates the World Trade Center itself, and there haven't been any complaints about that.
We have no problem with mosques. This is not a religious liberties issue.
What's the difference, 2 blocks, 4 blocks?
It's not blocks. That building was part of the attack. A part of the plane crashed through the roof.
A plan to build an Islamic community center near Ground Zero set off a national controversy with anger, passion, and more than a little misinformation. Opponents whipped up a fury, calling the project a grotesque mega mosque tied to terrorism.
Look, we've got to go after those who attacked Americans on 9/11, Al-Qaeda, certainly not moderate Muslims and not the faith of Islam, that there is a distinction, that there's a difference, and if people don't understand it, it's out of ignorance or misunderstanding. How do you counter that point? Even if President Bush said that what you're saying is not true.
I counter that point by saying, read the Quran, read the Hadith, read the Surah.
Well, they would counter that as well, I mean, and say that Islam, there's nothing in Islam, let me finish. It's a perversion of Islam it's a faith of peace.
Rumblings of outrage, led by right-wing anti-Muslim blogger Pamela Geller. In May of this year, Geller titled her blog, Monster Mosque Pushes Ahead in Shadow of World Trade Center Islamic Death and Destruction. She called it, quote, Islamic domination.
First, let me say I'm not anti-Muslim. That's a slanderous smear, and it's unfair. Secondly, I'm certainly not leading the charge. The majority of Americans, 70%, find this offensive, insulting, and deeply provocative.
You certainly have been on top of this story on your blog, though.
Well, the media woke up to it. I mean, you're saying that, according to this report, that slowly but surely it built. I'm going to tell you that as soon as that story was announced in November, there was a visceral response on the net, but the media really wasn't covering it. I don't know why you're carrying water for the most radical, intolerant ideology in the world today. There have been 20,000 documented radical Islamic attacks since 9/11, each one with the imprimatur of a Muslim cleric.
Yeah, you better be very careful. You're a woman. You better be very careful about saying who I carry water for, because you have no idea what you're talking about. And don't start putting me in the middle of your crap.
Don't you point to me.
I'll point to you all I want.
It needs to be stated that it was not dueling rallies, Geraldo. We had 30,000 people at our rally. There was maybe
according to the cops, you had 1,500.
Go to atlasshrugs.com and you'll see the pictures. No, I welcome spatial scientists. But what I'm saying is that was 9/11 was chosen because Daisy Khan said that she was going to break ground on the Ground Zero Mosque on September 11th. So it's not.
Is this another conspiracy theory?
It was in the New York. It was in the Daily News and it was in USA Today. No, it's not a conspiracy theory. That's a
Malik Shaban.
Their hope is to break ground here a year from now on the 10th anniversary of September 11th.
Real quick before you go, have you read the Quran?
Yes, I have.
I
strongly recommend Robert Spence's The Infidel's Guide to the Quran, and Ibn Waraq and Wafa Sultan and Noni Darwish. These are books from former Muslims that must be read by the American people to understand what it is they're facing. They just arrested 2 more jihadis. They were U.S. citizens at JFK Airport. You have to understand the threat doctrine if you're going to address the threat.
Ms. Geller, we're going to have to leave it there. We're going to get another point of view here. Mr. Sullivan is joining us here. And I want to ask you, she says she's read the Quran, and I guess she's pointing to some passage in the Quran where she believes that this is a faith that promotes violence. And is there a portion, is there a passage in the Quran that promotes what we saw Al-Qaeda do on 9/11?
Well, first, let me thank you for having me on and providing my what I call typical Muslim perspective. Number one, a few points I want to make real quick. Unfortunately, there's a lot of erroneous translations that are out there. What we have to do is ask ourselves, what are they hoping to accomplish with this protest today against the mosque?
They say they believe in tolerance, and so that's the end of the story as far as the mainstream media and the mayor of New York and everybody else is concerned, except for everybody with a grain of sense and eyes in our head.
This is a strong message, not just to the radical Islamists, that we have the backbone to stand up to the war that we face against them, but to those that would cower in the face of that peril, our media elite.
Now, speaking of media bias, you may recall that Pamela and I hosted a rally in June.
500 protesters showed up at our most hallowed ground and they hated Muslims as hard as they could hate them. That's when they spotted the 2 dark-skinned men who were speaking Arabic to each other. Part of the group surrounded the pair, and witnesses report shouts of "get out and go home."
The media coverage was all about an Arabic-speaking man who was supposedly roughed up by the crowd.
Both of them were Joseph Nasrallah and Karam El-Masri, immigrants from Egypt to California.
And that showed that we were all racist, anti-Muslim, and Islamophobic bigots.
I flew 9 hours in an airplane to come here, Nasrallah said, to protest the community center. He repeated, "I'm a Christian."
Well, he's our next speaker.
The problem, sir, is not what you are, but what the rest of them there are.
It's not the truth. They are lying. They're using taqiyya. They're using deceiving. They lie for the pastor. They lie for Pamela Geller and Robert Spencer. They lying. I hate lying.
Show me where Ground Zero is from here.
If real estate is about location, the question is, how close is too close? We started at El Gamal's building and headed to the World Trade Center. You can't see Ground Zero from here, but when you make the corner...
The World Trade Center is 2 blocks over there.
In the distance here, you can see the cranes where the new World Trade Center buildings are going up.
Yes.
It took us another 2 minutes to walk to the edge of what the government officially designates as Ground Zero.
This key fact, presented to the American public on a program once considered the gold standard of broadcast journalism, is completely false. While there is no official area designated as Ground Zero, there is an official government report on the 9/11 attacks. In Chapter 7 of this FEMA report, there are 9 buildings adjacent to the World Trade Center site that received major damage and were listed as structurally unsafe. When hijacker Marwan al-Shahi deliberately crashed United Flight 175 into the South Tower, 2 large pieces of the airplane continued flying north. One of its engines landed here at the corner of Church and Murray, while the landing gear crashed through the roof of the Burlington Coat Factory. This is 45 Park Place. This is Ground Zero.
Whenever they tell you that it's 600 feet from Ground Zero, this is your response. Lie. That building is Ground Zero. That building was hit and partially destroyed by the planes that went into those towers. There were human remains in that building. That building is Ground Zero. Why there?
Are you tired of being lied to? Are you tired of being smeared? Every New York politician and every mainstream media source on this story has said this is a story about tolerance against bigotry, and who do you think they're calling the bigots?
Molly Norris has had to change her name. You're evading the question,
You are
sir.
one of
it
the
was
most
part
anti-Muslim
of No,
bigots
you are
out
an
on the internet,
anti-non-Muslim. You are an
anti-non-Muslim
and an Islamic supremacist, and all you do is you hate. You hate
Pam, hold on.
and you
Pam, hold
lies.
on. Go ahead. Well, Pam also suggested that we should nuke Mecca, and this was done on her blog on February 24th, 2010. You can go there and see it. She also suggested that Obama is an anti-Semite, a pimp, and a jihadist,
I
and
believe
she put a
that's
picture of
true.
him urinating on the flag. She is a certified loon.
On June 6th, Geller held a rally at the World Trade Center. Geller kept writing, calling the project an act of jihad, a grotesque flag of conquest on Ground Zero.
To what degree are you obliged to tell the truth in your blog?
That's all I do is tell the truth.
To be accurate in your blog.
Okay, Scott.
You moved the mosque to Ground Zero. It's not going to be there.
That
it was
building
never
is
intended to be
Ground
there.
Zero. And I'll say something else. Truth is the new hate speech.
Many in the religious community say they're alarmed by what they see as growing Islamophobia in America, following the heated debate over the proposed building of an Islamic center near Ground Zero.
America, as Time magazine pointed out, is Islamophobic.
It's not Islamophobia, it's Islamorealism. And so what we've witnessed is this constant clubbing of the American psyche, sort of, clubbing them on the head with this nonsense. Because what we're really witnessing is candorophobia. Truth is the new hate speech. And just telling the truth is a radical act.
We cannot be intimidated. Let them call us whatever they want. Let them call us bigots, Islamophobes, whatever. Do you know that for the last year such statistics are available? 2008 FBI stats. Now, one hate crime against anybody is one too much, don't get me wrong. However, we're such an Islamophobic country. Every network's doing specials, Islamophobia. The imam and his wife were all Islamophobics. Ladies and gentlemen, there were over 3,000 so-called hate crimes classified in 2008 against blacks, 2,500 against gays, over 1,000 against Jews, 106 against Muslims. There's your Islamophobic nation, ladies and gentlemen. That's a false premise. Don't believe it.
We in the West have bent over backwards not to offend Muslims. We have changed our ways so as not to hurt the feelings of Muslims. What about our feelings? When are we to be considered as humans who are able to be offended?
Are we here today because we are opposing the Muslims to build mosques? No, we are not, but we are opposing the building of the mosque on sacred ground. We don't want them here around the World Trade Center site, do we? No. We don't want these mosques to be built around here, the World Trade Center, for a particular reason, because it will be very disrespectful to us, to the families that lost their relatives, their sons, brothers, children, and families.
So what you have is the majority of the American people strongly opposing this, yet somehow Pamela Geller and those who are gathered here are controversial. No, you're not controversial. Katie Couric is controversial. Charlie Gibson is controversial. Brian Williams is controversial. The New York Times is controversial.
I'm telling you, and I'm telling the imam who's probably watching tonight, it would be wise for you to say, we respect that sentiment, we may not agree with it, but we're going to move it away. I'll give you the last word.
Thank you. Well, the insensitivity is smokescreen for bigotry. The main organizer of the protest against the Islamic Cultural Center is Pamela Geller. She has on her website images of the Prophet. I cannot show it now. I have other images.
All right, but that doesn't.
She has
look,
organized.
if you want me to take care of that woman, I will.
Most of our family doesn't have a grave. Even people who has a grave on a cemetery, they get just small piece of body from mother, from father, from son. Rest of the body, it's ash and blood, and everything on the ground zero. This is the grave. This is the burial place. And I don't want to say what all Muslim is terrorist. Of course not. But people, 19 people who killed 3,000 Americans, they was Muslim. And we don't want mosque on the ground zero. They can build any place, but not ground zero.
One of the most disturbing stories to surface this year. You know, of course, a lot of noise was made about the Islamic Center or mosque down near the World Trade Center. But I think there wasn't enough sort of careful analysis and evaluation of where this bigotry towards 1.5 billion Muslims worldwide, and how this seething hatred many people feel for all Muslims, which I think is so misdirected and so wrong.
I married a daughter of Greek immigrants. One of her sisters married a Kashmiri Muslim, and I have Muslim relatives who I love very much. My son married a daughter of Korean immigrants. How does she have the nerve to call me or anybody else a bigot?
Maybe we need a Muslim version of The Cosby Show.
It's too close. It's too painful. It's too soon. I'm still trying to find remains of my son.
Look, at some point, I know it's sensitive here in New York and probably New Jersey, but we are going to have to get over 9/11.
The insensitivity on this issue has been remarkable. The demonization of the opponents of the mosque, the bullying of them, the attempts to manipulate public opinion, it's been unconscionable. And, you know, there was really... there's so many examples, but one particularly egregious one was at one of the hearings where one of the 9/11 family members, somebody who lost a brother, I believe it was, in the attacks on 9/11, and was explaining why she opposed this mosque, and somebody is heckling her from the audience and calling her a bigot, and she turned around and gave it right back to him.
As a testament to the life and death of my brother, and I'm here for the safety of my children and for the safety of our city. And I was never against Muslim people before 9/11, and I'm not against them now. And you know, if the IRS wanted to audit me as an American in the morning, in a heartbeat I'd have to open all my books. So it is not un-American to ask the imam in charge of this mosque, to open his books. So Mayor Bloomberg, that's not un-American. It's very American. And I hope you, and I'm not racist, thank you. No, I'm not. You're saying that so that it makes it sound like I'm racist, and I could not be more further from the two of the
let her
races.
continue
And I
her
apologize.
remarks. It's okay.
I apologize to days up there. We need to get the.
When the forces of jihad attacked New York, they attacked the world. And amongst those lost were people from 55 nations, people of every religion, of every persuasion. No place on earth was more multi-ethnic and multilingual than New York's proud towers. And this, ladies and gentlemen, this is exactly the reason that they were targeted. They constituted an insult to those who hold that there can be no peaceful cooperation among people and nations without submission to Sharia. To those, indeed, to those who wish to impose the legal system of the Islamic ideology to the rest of us. But, as we all know, America, New York, and Sharia are incompatible. New York stands for freedom, for openness, and for tolerance. Indeed, New York is rooted in Dutch tolerance. New York is tolerant, not intolerant. Suppose New York were intolerant. Suppose it would only allow people of one persuasion within its walls. Then it would not be New York, but it would be like Mecca. Mecca, a city without freedom. Whatever your religion, your persuasion, or your gender is, in New York you will find a home. But in Mecca, if your religion is not Islam, you are not even welcome to enter the city.
Mr. Mayor, are you satisfied, and have you spoken to Imam Rauf, that he is indeed a man of peace, given his background where he's supposedly supported Hamas, blamed the US for 9/11 attacks?
My job is not to vet clergy in this city. That's not what I should do, and I don't happen to think that anybody in government to do it. Everybody has a right to their opinions. You don't have to worship there. You don't have to support wherever there is.
We have shown we have much respect and above all, tolerance during these very long 9 years. Tolerance for the inept result of the MTA, the Lower Manhattan Development Corporation, Silverstein Properties, and SDL in building a proper and timely memorial site to honor our loved ones. Tolerance. We've shown tolerance for a mayor that now puts his own business interest in the Middle East ahead of the long suffering of family members.
The tolerance that is crucial to our freedom requires a line of defense. And Mayor Bloomberg uses tolerance as an argument to allow Imam Rauf and his sponsors to build a so-called Cordoba Mosque. But Mayor Bloomberg, your mayor, he forgets, however, that openness can never be open-ended. A tolerant society is not a suicidal society.
Any further attempt to derail this development would at its core be un-American. If you try to exclude one religion from New York City, that you are in fact trying to eliminate every religion.
We never said that mosques can't be here. We never said that. But not at ground zero. Not at ground zero. Not at ground zero.
We celebrate our Constitution with a national holiday. Both the American and Danish Constitutions enshrine the freedom of religion. However, neither of our Constitution, nor the Ten Commandments, nor the Gospels say you shall be stupid. Allowing this mosque to be built so close to the ground zero is not only an insult, it is an act of stupidity.
President Obama could have stayed out of the Ground Zero mosque controversy. He stayed out of it for a very long time. You almost have to think he was planning to announce it at the iftar dinner. That was no accident. He could have easily not waded into the controversy. Easily. He chose not to. Why?
Ground Zero is indeed hallowed ground. But let me be clear. As a citizen and as president, I believe that Muslims have the right to practice their religion as everyone else in this country. And that includes the right to build a place of worship and a community center on private property in Lower Manhattan in accordance with local laws and ordinances. This is America.
Although the Constitution affords this right, we do not believe that this is as much about rights as it is about honor and integrity. In other words, just because you can do something doesn't mean you should.
President Obama suggested that this 9/11 this year should be used as a date to try and develop a better understanding of the Muslim world. While many of us would deeply agree that perhaps it is time to try and better understand a world that could produce so many fanatics who believe that terror and bloodshed and the killing of innocent men, women, and children in any way is acceptable, the president is definitely not on the same page with most Americans and New Yorkers over this mosque. His lack of compassion for 9/11 victims like the ones we've heard from today is breathtaking. Shame on you, President Obama.
Even as mosque promoters cloak themselves in constitutional freedoms, they have no trouble denying those freedoms to their opponents.
Advertisements so disturbing, the MTA has, up to now at least, refused to run it.
Ads plastered on New York City buses, they're everywhere, and the MTA is the censor-in-chief deciding which ads you can see and which ones you can't. And this is one they didn't want you to see, an ad evoking 9/11. While opposing building what's being called the mosque at Ground Zero, the MTA said, no way, but the ad sponsors are fighting back in court.
They said, you have to remove the plane. I said, I have to remove the plane? Why do I have to remove the plane? They said, no 9/11 images. I said, but it's a part of American history. How could that be? How is Iwo Jima banned? Is Pearl Harbor banned? Is Gettysburg banned? He says, listen, you have to remove the plane.
She told me the agency ordered 4 redesigns. Remove the plane, remove the smoke, plus other changes, and still the MTA would not approve a final version until they got smacked with a lawsuit.
This case is about the First Amendment.
What's more insulting and offensive, that image of truth or a 15-story megamosque looking down on the sacred grounds of Ground Zero?
I think that as terrible as this story is, this idea, and it is on its face a terrible idea, it reveals Islam and Islamic supremacism. Because while the dishonest Imam Rauf says it's about healing and it's about outreach, it's had the opposite effect. It's been very painful, and if it was truly about healing, they would withdraw it. And so it is a supremacist act to callously dismiss the pain and the grief that they're causing. I find their dismissiveness radically intolerant. We are constantly being schooled in this hypersensitivity in the Muslim world. You can't run the Danish cartoons, which were 12 very innocuous cartoons. The producers of Comedy Central put Muhammad in a Huggy Bear costume because you can't show, Muhammad, and there's a death threat on their head. And when the death threat was announced, a somewhat uninformed and virtually unknown cartoonist in Seattle, Molly Norris, declared, well, everybody draw Muhammad. Let's have everybody draw Muhammad Day, because you can't kill everybody. And of course she retracted within 24 hours because of the ensuing brouhaha. And there's a fatwa on her head. She had to go into hiding. She had to change her name. She had to go into witness protection at her own expense. This woman should be on the front page of every newspaper and every broadcast in America, in the world. She is the icon for free speech. And yet I'm sure that most of the people have never heard of Molly Norris. So we're constantly being schooled and admonished about this hypersensitivity in the Muslim world. Where's the reciprocity? Where's the mutual and mutual respect? Where's the mutual and mutual understanding? Where is the sensitivity to the non-Muslim world and to the Muslims of conscience that are against the Ground Zero mega mosque?
The building was abandoned on 9/11 when, in an odd twist of fate, a piece of landing gear from one of the hijacked planes crashed through its roof. We now know it as the Ground Zero Mosque, which is a bit of a misnomer because it's not at Ground Zero, but 2.5 blocks away.
Park 51 is a community center. It is 2 blocks north of the World Trade Center site. In New York City, 2 blocks is a great distance.
Was it deliberate that you chose something that was that close to Ground Zero, or was it just that that building happened to be an appropriate space?
I think the building came to us, which goes to show that there is a symbolism there and there's a divine hand in it, that it's so close to the tragedy, that its close proximity is very symbolic.
We are nowhere near the World Trade Center site.
And actually, the building found us because it's been abandoned for the last 9 years, just was sitting vacant.
I made a pact to help my community find a prayer space.
Just to meet the needs of the people's, worship needs, we decided to look for a larger building.
This looks like it is going to be the most famous community center in the world.
There is no lack of mosques in New York. The contrary, dozens of buildings where Muslims can pray. It's not about the lack of space for prayer. It's about the symbolic meaning.
But it is a place that Muslims will come to pray if it's completed. This will be a center for prayer.
Well, there's going to be a prayer component.
When outrage was first expressed, they said, oh, it's not a mosque, it's a prayer center. Well, a prayer center is a mosque.
Daisy Khan insists that the center, which will include an arts theater, a place for prayer, athletics, and education, will be a testimonial to healing and interfaith harmony.
200 mosques in New York, and yet another one is not a big deal.
Iman Raouf, he said that the opposition was hostile. Why were they so hostile? Their grandchildren were going to be Muslim anyway. What I'm saying to you is that at some point, yes, there was that our grandchildren were going to be Muslim anyway. So we ought to, I guess,
Whose grandchildren?
All of ours.
All of ours.
We will, by the time that...
Ayan Hirsi Ali lives under constant death threat for producing a movie with assassinated filmmaker Theo Van Gogh. In this encounter with mosque spokesperson Daisy Khan, she's introduced to their particular brand of bridge building.
You have freedom. Nobody's throwing you anywhere. Your rights are protected. I think that it's your perception of being a victim, and I think that
I am not a victim. I am. Stop calling me that. You're the one running around with a bodyguard.
You are just.
She needs it.
And I have.
She needs it.
And
Why
do you think that is?
Sir, for the record.
Yes.
My life is under threat.
Yeah, we all are. Anybody,
hold on one second.
in public life
Check with the police
in a
department.
free society has nuts that threaten their lives.
Check with the police department. My husband's life is under threat. We do not walk around with bodyguards because we love this country. We don't walk around with big bodyguards.
You don't have to run.
Because we don't want to use taxpayers' money.
Were you surprised by the negative reaction from the families of the victims of 9/11?
We were expecting some sort of resistance, but not an organized resistance. We were expecting them. Some families might need some hand-holding. We might want to speak to them. But what we did not expect is a national coalition of people coming together, from majority of them coming from outside New York. Pamela Geller is a lady, and Robert Spencer. Together, the two of them have formed something called Stop Islamization of America, and that is the group that is leading this.
Will you reject any money that comes either directly or indirectly from any person, any country, any organization, any corporation that has any links to terrorism? Will you be doing due diligence?
We are going to be doing extreme due diligence, and we are going to hire the best security experts in the country to help us walk through the process. And we plan on being very transparent throughout the whole process.
I'd like to ask you a couple questions. Can you tell us where you got the money to raise the money, to put down all that money on the mosque? Where have you raised the money, Mr. El Jamal? Where's all the money come from? Sharif El Jamal, why won't you talk to us, sir? Why are you running? Why are you running? We have legitimate questions for you, sir. Why won't you answer?
The other developer in this case, Sharif Al-Gamal, was a waiter as of 2 years ago. How all of a sudden did this guy get $4 to $5 million for a down payment for this property?
He also has a bit of a sketchy past. He's had a few run-ins with the law.
I mean, I know that tipping is good here in New York, but $4.5 million for this building when a couple years earlier he was just waiting tables.
Right, and actually 4 months after he bought the mosque for $4.8 million, he bought another building for $45 million. $45 million, which is how we found one of his associates, a guy by the name of Hisham El Zanati. El Zanati was backing, co-signing one of El Gamal's loans on that $45 million building for $39 million. So he's staking his fortune for this El Gamal. So we were curious, well, what's the connection here? Turns out that this El Zanati guy is actually one of the principal investors in the mosque. He put down a good chunk of the change to buy the mosque. He's an Egyptian-born man, a businessman. Well, we uncovered something else that's a little stunning about this guy. Back in 1999, Megan, this guy donated money to a terrorist organization, Holy Land Foundation. Now, he donated the money in 1999. The federal government shut HLF, Holy Land Foundation, down in 2001 and declared it a terrorist organization. 5 of its members, its leaders, went to prison.
So you've got somebody who has donated money to a terrorist organization who is basically backing this mosque financially.
That is correct.
For those who would say this is not an olive branch to greater understanding, this is more an act of defiance, how would you answer those people?
In 2002, he attended a sermon by Imam Faisal Abdul Rauf, who has led a small mosque in Lower Manhattan for more than 3 decades.
I remember going up to him by his 3rd sermon and saying, Imam, it's not fair that 70 people get to listen to this message.
Imam Faisal Abdul Rauf owns the building, the same imam who's trying to build the Islamic Center near Ground Zero, a spiritual leader that some tenants are calling a slumlord.
It's just disgusting.
We do realize what is at stake here.
9/11 was a watershed, was a major milestone and a major catalytic force in catalyzing the attention towards the issue of Islam.
We know what this so-called Cordoba Mosque really means. Imam Rauf maintains that American secular law and Sharia law are based on the same principles.
What I mean by that is that the foundational societal contract, the themes, the existential worldview on which the American Declaration of Independence is based, is something which is fundamentally Islamic.
Imam Rauf refuses to condemn terrorists because he says that terrorism, I quote,
the issue of terrorism is a very complex question, and I'm a bridge builder.
But I'm asking though, is Hamas a terrorist organization?
I've defined my work as a bridge builder. I do not want to be placed, neither will I accept to be placed in a position of being put in a position where I am the target of one side or another.
He says, and I quote again Imam Raouf, that America is an accessory to the crime that happened on 9/11. In fact, Imam Raouf said, in the most direct sense, I quote him again,
in the most direct sense, Osama bin Laden is made in the USA.
And terrorism will only end if the West acknowledges the harm it has done to Muslims. Ladies and gentlemen, this crazy and idiotic remarks of this extreme imam proves that this man should never play the game he has in mind here in Manhattan.
The Imam Faisal Abdul Rauf is on record in favor of bringing Islamic law, Sharia, to the United States. Read his book. Read his book. He says there should be restrictions on the freedom of speech in the United States. It's in there.
You brought this is in this book. This is the imam that is spearheading the effort to build the mosque. These are his words. He's the one that has argued that Sharia law could be used in the U.S.
The media never discusses these issues. They don't discuss the people that he extols. They don't discuss the work that he respects and advances, and nor do they discuss or dissect any of the information that he's disseminating. Clearly, they didn't read his book. I don't even think they read the title in Arabic. The Call to Prayer, Islamic Dawah from the World Trade Center rubble.
The idea is that he is saying that we're going to be spreading Islam, proselytizing for Islam, which is what Dawah is, in lower Manhattan from the World Trade Center rubble, from the wreckage of the World Trade Center. And so this is something that he's been planning for years. This will be the triumphal mosque of all triumphal mosques. It will outdo the Dome of the Rock and the Al-Aqsa Mosque on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, or be second only to them. Because, of course, America is not only the most powerful country in the world still, even in the age of Obama, but also America is the foremost rival to the Islamic world in terms of America offers a political system to the world, and Islam offers a political system to the world.
I mean, are we offline right now?
Sure, the interview's over.
Okay, good. Yeah, I mean, things that we've done, for example, I didn't want to say it on your show, but football is a very good analogy for what's happening in the world. It is strategy in motion, and you have plays. You know, you have to design your plays, and you have to design your plays knowing that the other side is not going to be passive. So if we have strategic action plays, designed plays in the area of foreign policy, in the area of healing that divide, in the area of, and then you unpack and get of Israel, then what do you do? What are the specific actions that you might do? Because things are always moving, things are always happening. So you have to analyze the situation constantly, and you have to have just like you have your offensive coach, your defensive coaching staff, and you have your head coach and so forth. We think of ourselves as an analogy of that. We have to have our head coaching staff. We have to have our foreign policy head coach. We have to have our Palestinian head coach, etc. And then you design plays for that.
Interestingly enough, though, it doesn't mean that the head coach is necessarily the president, because of whatever country or prime minister, because they may still be trapped by various constraints in an old game.
No, we've created a different concept, a different model, Mark. I'm the head coach of this strategic initiative, and the President of the United States or the President of Malaysia or the President of England is like a player that you want to bring in for particular plays. They are the members of the team that you want to bring in because we're looking at it exactly like American football. You want to gain yardage, so you just want to keep scoring first downs.
He believes in Sharia. Sharia denies the freedom of speech. Under Sharia, if you are a Muslim and you leave Islam, you are liable to be killed. Under Sharia, there is discrimination institutionalized against women and against non-Muslims.
September 11th, 2001, 3,000 Americans were murdered, not just because they were of the wrong faith, but because they believed in the freedom of the individual, not Sharia law.
I had a news reporter ask me, why do you care about a mosque in Ground Zero? You're down in North Carolina. I said, brother, on September 11th, it wasn't New York City that was attacked. It was America that was attacked. It was freedom that was attacked. And we can't forget not only what happened, not only the murderous intent that killed 3,000 Americans, we can't forget for a moment that they wanted to kill 50,000 Americans, or maybe 100,000 Americans. So we can't ever forget that murderous intent.
Imam Rauf extols the work of many of the scholars and imams that were named in the NYPD report on radicalization as the problem.
He appears on all the major networks. He's a go-to guy. He's somebody who's in consideration for Times Person of the Year. He is in the Washington Post, the New York Times.
You've been called a jihadi, a friend of terrorists, a man who can't be trusted. So who are you?
I'm a man of peace, Scott.
And so the smooth deceptions that he's fronting are a key element of the Islamic supremacists' campaign in the United States to make us get our guard down.
He is, in fact, traveling the world at our expense as a paid spokesman for the State Department sent around the world to explain our country to other people, notwithstanding the radical and extreme statements that he's made.
If 9/11 happens there again, I want to be the first to die.
He is the man who has gone around the world talking about how our soldiers have killed more innocent Muslims than Al-Qaeda has of innocent non-Muslims. That is reading from Al-Qaeda's suicide bomber recruitment handbook. That's what this imam does.
So even beyond the mosque controversy, even if a new location can be found, I think we need to have a serious conversation about what it is at the State Department that has motivated them to finance the imam and perhaps others like him.
I'm a 9/11 paramedic. I lost two of my partners that day, and it really saddens me that we even have to be here today. I listened to the imam say he didn't know the pain this was going to inflict. I hear the imam say he wants to bridge gaps and bring Muslims and non-Muslims together. Does that look like it's happening? I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. Maybe he didn't know then, but he knows now.
What's your response to calls from Rick Lazio and others to investigate the organizers, how they're funding it, how they're financing the center?
You know, this is about giving those people the right to say what they want to say. That's exactly the issue here. Even if I disagree with it, they have a right to call for anything they want. I do not think we should be investigating. That's between the donors and them, and the government should not get involved in it.
El Gamal estimates it will cost more than $120 million to build. And it was reported this week he'd like a portion of that to come from federal funds meant to revitalize Lower Manhattan.
Because we don't want to use taxpayers' money. Because we don't want to use taxpayers' money. Because we don't want to use taxpayers' money.
Under Islamic law, the non-Muslims, the dhimmis, have to pay the jizya, which is a tax, to the Islamic State for the privilege of not being killed and being allowed to live their lives. And that's just that's really the core part of the institutionalized discrimination they have to live under. Now, in the Islamic empires of the past, it was the dhimmis and their tax money, their jizya, that actually financed the growth of those empires. And when those communities, the non-Muslim communities, were bled dry, then the empires went into decline. Now, what's telling in our own age is that the Ground Zero mosque people are now asking for public money to pay for this mosque. They want non-Muslims to pay for their triumphal mosque. It is exactly the pattern of the non-Muslims paying the jizya in the Islamic states of the past, and that money being used to finance jihad warfare against more non-Muslims. It's just the same thing.
I think the problem is that because we know so little of the funding, and they've not been forthcoming at all about the funding, they have not been transparent at all about the funding. They talk about it being a neighborhood, a little neighborhood, well, it's not so little, a neighborhood center, community center, but it's getting these huge amounts of money from the Middle East. So what? So little New York City Jewish kids can swim in a pool? Forgive me, I'm not buying it.
Bloomberg, of course, is also completely inconsistent. He and other New York politicians have said that they can't do anything about the mosque because it's private property, private enterprise. The city cannot and should not interfere. Okay, fine. But then Walmart just recently announced plans to build in New York City their first store, and the city is up in arms and saying that there's not going to be any Walmart in New York City. They're going to forbid it.
The NRA was going to open a super restaurant, sports complex in Times Square. And Chuck Schumer, along with other politicians, stopped it because the NRA, you know, it's a bad message. The gun message is a bad message. And they stopped the NRA from building what would have contributed, you know, to the economy of New York City.
The city can and does stop private enterprises from doing what they want when the city deems it to be in their interests. And so they want this mosque. That's all. They want this mosque there.
We understand that with the great responsibility of religious freedom in our country and this great right, you have to make the right decisions. And it is not right to put a mosque here at a place where this imam this week said, it's not sacred ground. America, are you standing on sacred ground right now?
As a result of the growing public outcry and determined efforts of people of truth, Imam Rauf and his wife Daisy Khan were removed from the leadership of the Cordoba Initiative. Replacing them is Imam Adhami. But even with this victory, the fight is far from over.
Well, there's been a major shakeup this weekend in the group pushing for a Ground Zero mosque. The controversial Imam, Faisal Rauf, is out, but he's being replaced by a man who may have controversy of his own.
Are you surprised by the selection of this new imam to head up this project?
Well, I'm not surprised at all in the sense of this imam shuffle. I mean, it's a disaster for them. So this is a great victory for people that love America. It's a great victory for people that want to see the end of this sick charade. They've got rid of Imam Rauf. I mean, this guy's been totally exposed for his terror connections, for his support of terror, Sharia, etc. And thank you to Pamela Geller, the freedom fighter that led the fight to expose this guy. But this is a tragic sitcom. Now they're bringing in Adhami, and he's connected to Imam Wahaj, who is an unindicted co-conspirator in the World Trade Center bombing, and he was a character witness for Rahman, the blind sheikh, who played a significant role in the World Trade Center bombing in 1993, and is now serving a life sentence in prison.
But Mr.
So
Glasgow,
this is
when you say this new imam is connected to this other controversial imam, can't you say on some level all New York imams are connected? What's your evidence that he has ever done anything wrong, this new imam? I don't want to paint him with some sort of controversial brush just if he's spoken to an imam in the past.
Oh, he hasn't just spoken to him. The evidence is out there. Even go to Pamela Geller's site, Atlas Shrugs. It's all been exposed. Number one, he's called him his beloved imam. He's his hero. He's on record saying it. And he even volunteered to design his mosque. So this is his hero. He's on record. He makes no secret that this is his hero. He calls him his beloved imam. And this Imam Wahaj is a terror supporter.
Look, it's the morphing mosque narrative. We witnessed this again and again from the very first.
These guys are being exposed. They're doing the imam shuffle now. But I'm very hopeful. Freedom-loving people are hopeful because they're doing rearranging the deck chairs on top of the Titanic. But the Titanic is sinking. We're very hopeful that we've got these people on the ropes now.
The latest rationale for having this mosque here is that if he moves it now, he doesn't know what the radical Islamists might do. The day that we start worrying about the actions of terrorists, and that's what they are, over the concerns of our own safety, our own country, our own decency, we are finished.
He stated that if this situation is not handled correctly, it could become something very dangerous indeed. Does that sound like tolerance to you? It actually sounds more like a threat.
And it's a threat that we've seen from many Islamic leaders in the West, that they say that if you don't grant us this concession, then there will be unrest, there will be anger, you will have to placate us in some other way. Really, even the claims of victimhood by American Muslim groups in the wake of jihad plotting, and the idea that the police are victimizing them or profiling them or causing them undue difficulty, and that the police then have to, or the FBI has to reach out to them. This is a species of the same thing. We have to give in to their demands. We have to not resist their advance, and then things will go well for us. But if we start to resist, then there come the threats. And so the problem is that if you start on the road of accommodating Sharia, if you start on the road of allowing for changes in the way that we do business, or changes in the way that we operate our businesses and do our banking, or the changes in the way that we run our educational systems, or various other things, the installation of footbaths, for example, and public installations, airports and schools and so on, for Muslim ablutions before prayers, if we start granting these things, then we're only reinforcing the principle that where Islamic law or practice and American law or practice conflict, then it's American law and practice that have to give way, not Islamic law and practice. And once we start on that road, there's always more Islamic law to accommodate.
And I think as we remember and honor the victims and the families of the 9/11 tragedy, it's with that in mind that we have to view the proposal to build the Ground Zero Mosque. It's a very strange enterprise that says we want to increase religious tolerance and understanding. And if you don't agree with that, we're going to increase religious tolerance and understanding whether you like it or not.
That's not accidental, the name Cordoba. So when people became aware of Cordoba, and Newt Gingrich spoke about it, all of a sudden, on Monday it was Cordoba, and on Tuesday it's Park 51. And if you notice, the media never returned to Cordoba. It was Park 51, unquestioned. Nobody even said, why would you change it?
But really, it was a master stroke, and you have to give them credit for cleverness in calling it Cordoba in the first place. Because Cordoba was, in the first place, a rabat, a beachhead to expand Islam's presence in Europe. But also, Cordoba became a center of Islamic Spain, and it was a place where Jews and Christians lived as dhimmis, as the people of the book are denoted in Islamic law. And so the signal to the Islamic world in calling it Cordoba is that this is a place from which we're going to be fighting to impose Islamic law, in which Muslims will reign supreme and dominate in the society, and Jews and Christians will be subjugated and denied basic rights. Whereas in America, we've already been sold a bill of goods about how Muslim Spain was a sort of a paradise of proto-multiculturalism, a place where Jews and Christians and Muslims live together as equals in harmony. That's a historical fiction, but it's very widespread assumption in the United States.
This is the history of Islam. They have destroyed in Istanbul, in Jerusalem, in India, in Ayodhya, Kashi, Mathura, in Damascus, in Jerusalem, in Bulgaria, wherever they go, it is the history of Muslims to destroy cultural, religious and praying centers of other faiths and construct mosques over the ruins of that center.
It's not that they're digging in their heels. This is war. And this is an important... In Islam, I don't think one can minimize the importance of symbolism. And this is one mother of a symbol.
And there are thousands of triumphal mosques built over the sites of churches and synagogues and Hindu temples in the Islamic world. There are no mosques of harmony, peace, and reconciliation built on the sites of previous jihad attacks to reach out to the victims. None.
9 years ago, when the news of the terrible atrocity in New York reached Europe, some Muslim youth danced in the streets. In a poll in my own country, 2/3 of the Muslim immigrants in the Netherlands expressed partial or full understanding for the 9/11 terrorists. So if a mosque would be built here on ground zero, such people would feel triumphant, and we should never ever give them that feeling.
I served here during the recovery, and I'm also a survivor. I was underneath the South Tower when the tower collapsed, and I'm here alive by the power of God. And that caused me pain to know that I'm alive, and many of my friends and comrades died.
This is an aerial photo of Ground Zero, and some of the men in my unit made this for me. And I carried it next to my heart, inside my flak jacket, when I was in Iraq. And no. Ladies and gentlemen, the message here, what's important here, is the words on the top. Say, never forget. Never forget. Never forget. Never forget.
I can tell you, everybody asks same question. How you feel after 9 years? I can tell you a secret. Very bad. Every year is bad. It's more, it's worse. Because I get older and I feel lonely and nobody can bring me back my son. I wanna ask Mr. Bloomberg, because in other way I have no chance to ask him. Mr. Bloomberg, tell us please, do you sleep well?
Easily 80-90% of the families are seriously offended. I know some people that are crying over this who have lost loved ones. You or I might not even agree. We might say, okay, put the mosque there, but maybe we haven't lost that son, that father, A person who's watching their child today, and you still remember every day that person is gone. It was an attack in the name of Islam.
You acknowledge there's a lot of emotion, many of you have, around this issue, and that this is painful for some of those who lost family members in the 9/11 attacks. Do you see any scenario in which you or others, people in the community, could ask this imam, the developers of the mosque, to say, because, yes, you have the right to do this, but because of the pain that it's causing some family members, would you consider moving the mosque?
I think that would be handing the terrorists a victory. It is the last thing that we should do.
There is no chance whatsoever that Bloomberg could be correct, that the Ground Zero Mosque will show Islamic jihadists that we are tolerant and peaceful, and they will be ashamed and lay down their arms.
Allowed me, if you forgot, it started with the Imam, a blind Sheikh, Umar Abdurrahman, when he tried to bring down the World Trade Center, the #1, and he fell. When we apprehended him, everybody went to sleep, assuming that the blind sheikhs and then co-conspirator, they are behind bar and there is no problems. No!
My home is within 2 blocks of the mosque that trained the people, those evil, cowardly bastards who flew those planes into this tower. They trained them in Falls Church, Virginia.
We've forgotten. 9 years later, we've gotten complacent and we've forgotten. But since those attacks, hundreds of thousands of men and women around the world have been killed by jihadists in the name of radical Islam. Hundreds of thousands of men and women around the world. From Egypt to Bali, from Baghdad to Kabul. No one can forget there was a car bomb here in Times Square just months ago. Folks, if you think this is over, it's just beginning. It's just beginning.
Where are the churches in Saudi Arabia? Where are the churches in even Egypt? The churches are being burned.
I came from a country where the policy of Islamization, it took me to being a slave when I was 9 years old. The policy of Islamization slaughtered 3 million of my fellow Christians in southern Sudan. The policy of Islamization and Arabization left 7 million my fellow Christian refugees in Sudan, the biggest and the largest refugees since World War II. In the state that I came from in southern Sudan, it used to be one mosque. I was in Sudan a month ago. There are 113 mosques.
I'm sorry to show you my picture. This is one of our dear friends in Egypt. One of 8 of them in the Christmas night. In the name of Islam, they said Allahu Akbar, and they killed them in front of the church.
And you know that Mayor Rudy Giuliani made an excellent point recently. And he said, if this mosque is really about building bridges, and these folks are about healing, then they're going to hear this message, and they're going to move. They're going to move the right thing, and they're going to move. But if they're warriors, they're going to dig in, and they're going to stay. Well, you know what? We have warriors too. God bless America.
God bless America! Wake up, America! Wake up, all the states of America!
You see, what happens is Ground Zero becomes all about the mosque and no longer about the attack. The largest attack on this country. They're stealing that. And they've co-opted the narrative.
There was 14-story building of rubble that smoked until December of 2001.
Nobody talking what we against to build mosque. No. Everybody can build anything what they want. You want to pray, God bless you. You want a mosque, God bless you. But not put mosque on a cemetery. Because this place...
3,000 pairs of eyes are looking down on us right now. And what they're saying is, will you be our voice?
I do remember that day when I was working on the Braggett Brigade. I do remember that day when I was under the rubble looking for our loved ones and hoping that I was to find somebody alive. I was not able.
It's almost 9 years, and I'm hoping that America is watching. I'm hoping that America is remembering, because make no mistake, on September 11th, it was an act of war. And thank the military that has lost almost 5,000 troops from that day defending us. I don't know what to say to jar a memory's memory. I want America to remember. What do you need to hear? You want to hear that there were people that were so frightened that they jumped out of buildings and they exploded on impact? You want to hear that there were dismembered bodies all over the way? You want to hear that we looked at people that were gutted? There's things that we haven't spoken about. We couldn't stop the people from responding. The fire department that day lost 343 firefighters. They were unstoppable. They poured into that building. The Port Authority Police, 37 police officers. NYPD, 23 police officers. EMS lost people. Civilians were there. They helped people. They died helping people. America, where are you on this? Where are you? Don't you remember? Don't you remember? What is it going to take? The great poet Langston Hughes told us to hold fast to dreams, for if dreams die, life is a broken-winged bird that cannot fly.